We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Tuesday. Got a bunch of stuff going on. This is going to be kind of weird today because the last three programs I did, I had guests. Now it's just going to be me. I hope I didn't spoil you. I hope you don't get bored with just me, but I'll do my best here to keep your attention and try to keep you informed. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. I got a bunch of emails because with all the guests, I haven't read the emails, so I have to catch up on that, and I will be doing that shortly. I just wanted to give a little bit of a plug, and this isn't a paid plug. You might remember a gentleman that was on the program. His name is Bobby Hedgeland Taylor. Interesting guy. He's a comedian. He's an actor. He's also a former circus aerialist. You remember that? Yeah. And apparently he trains people to do trapeze and aerial acts in movies and such right now. Very engaging guy. And actually, the show was very popular. In the 770 shows I've done, his show, in terms of listens, he ranks number 7. So that's pretty impressive. Out of 770 programs, podcast, he was number 7 as far as the amount of people that listened. So needless to say, we probably have to get Bobby back. And I'll talk to him about that. We've already kind of talked about it a little bit, and he should be back sometime soon. Anyway, I wanted to give Bobby a plug, because in addition to all the things he's done, he's written a book, and this is the book. I'll see if I can get it without the light glaring on it. You see what it says? Okay, there we go. It says #shit my mama says. And look at that sweet old lady giving you the finger. But Bobby wrote this book because his mother was suffering with dementia, and she got pretty outgoing and said pretty much what's on her mind. And since I am who I am, I guess I have some appreciation for that. I can only imagine what's going to happen when I get really old, should I get that same kind of condition. How's it going to be different if I just get out and speak my mind? Because I'm already fucking doing it. I'm supposedly of sound mind and body. Anyway, I give you just a taste of what's in the book. You can get this at Amazon. I think you can get it at Bobby's website too, but you can check it out on Amazon. You got to put #shit my mama says. And it's some funny shit. There's one here. It says, as they're walking out of church one day, Mom was just not having it. She said, "Immaculate conception? Bullshit. Mary got fucked. If you kids want to stay here and listen to this bullshit, be my guest." Give you just a taste of what Bobby Hedgeland Taylor's mom's about. But we'll have him back on and we'll talk more about some of the stuff he's doing. And we're going to focus more on the news of today. As much as he's has all these things in the entertainment business, he has some serious insights and perceptions about the news of the day. And I think while we spent a lot of time talking about him, introducing you to him, we're going to spend some more time talking about what we normally talk about here on the Rational Boomer podcast. And that, of course, is politics and news of the day. Now, as I said, I have a number of emails because I don't read emails when I have guests. I just figure that's kind of rude. You know, typically the shows with the guests go longer anyway. So I thought I'd just stack them up. And since it's just me alone today, we'll start out by reading some emails. Oh, I want to remind you too. Now, if you're listening to the podcast in the audio format, which most people do, because that's what I've been doing for the longest time, just a reminder that if you go to YouTube, you go to rationalboomer.com, you can get all the platforms I'm on. But if you want to get the video version of this podcast, you can go to YouTube and just hit the link in my link tree. All you have to do is go to rationalboomer.com. You'll see a bunch of links there. Hit the one you want, and it will bring you there. All right. Now, these first two emails come from the same person. It's a woman that goes by the name Old Soul. And the only thing I can make of that, because I don't know her name and I've never seen what she looks like. I can only suggest that she's younger, but has an old soul. But she's a very nice lady, very engaging in her emails. And maybe at some point we can get her on the program. Anyway, she gave me two emails. First one says, "Hey, Boomer, I saw your recent video about Arizona paying to fix unbroken election policies. Today I read this. Arizona's Republican Party had less than $50,000 in cash reserves in its state and federal bank accounts as of March 31st to spend on overhead such as rent, payroll, and political campaign operations. How are they going to pay for this election nonsense? They are almost bankrupt. Do you know what happens when they're completely bankrupt? Thanks for all you do, Old Soul." Well, if they're completely bankrupt, I would hope they just go away. Who needs the fucking Republican Party anyway? But we're seeing this a lot. Everybody thinks this all these investigations and indictments are affecting only Donald Trump. It's affecting the Republican Party. You have the base that, of course, is supporting the Republican Party, but they only have so much money. And after Donald Trump grifted everything he has out of them, they have limited funds. The more normal folks don't want to support a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists, so they are having problems. She sends a second email. "Hey, Boomer, I wrote an email a few days ago asking about the AZ Republican Party going broke. I just read an article in Politico. It's not just AZ. The Michigan Republican Party is completely broke and unable to get donations. The Colorado Republican Party is about to be evicted from their offices because they can't pay rent. Last month, Minnesota, my home state here, the Republican Party had fewer than $54 in the bank. What in the world is going on? Trump is one thing, but the whole party's broke. Thanks, Old Soul." Well, as I was saying here, the Republican Party is in crisis at this point. While they will tell you that everybody supports them and everybody's behind the things they're doing, the vast majority aren't. I mean, let's take, for example, overturning Roe v. Wade. We know 70% of this country supports Roe v. Wade. Now, if the party that you normally support overturns something that you feel strongly about, are you going to send them money? See, this is the thing you don't hear about. You hear about all the troubles for Donald Trump and some of the politicians, but the Republican Party is taking a beating overall. And this is why I'm suggesting that there are other things to consider. A lot of people are concerned about Donald Trump going to trial and getting convicted before the 2024 election. And I don't think that's a big deal. Donald Trump is going to get buried in legal problems. He's going to have trouble getting money. We already know he's got a little cash flow problem. But it's not just Donald Trump. It's the Republicans in general. They're not gaining the donations that they once did because so many people are against so many things that the Republican Party is doing. They want to cater to the evangelicals and the base, but unfortunately, the rest of the people in this country think that shit's crazy and they're just not going to support it. So the Republican Party, over and above the trials and the convictions ultimately with Donald Trump, they're going through all kinds of other shit. The money's just not flowing like it was. So we don't hear about that much, but the fact is it's becoming a problem. Thank you, Old Soul, for your two emails. This next one comes to us from Francisco. He says, "Mike, Kevin clings to the Speaker of the House job because he is third in line for the presidency in case of..." I don't hear shows talking about that. Thank you for your show. You do hear that some talking about the Speaker of the House being third in line for the presidency. But you got to understand what that means. He's only third in line for the presidency if something happens to the president and the vice president at the same time. Hear me out on this. Something happens to the president. Say that happens to Joe Biden. Something happens. He resigns. He gets sick, whatever. Kamala Harris becomes the president. But what does Kamala Harris do as soon as she becomes president? She appoints a vice president. So if Joe Biden goes by the wayside and Kamala Harris goes by the wayside, that doesn't mean Kevin McCarthy is going to get it, because she will have already appointed a vice president. We saw that with Richard Nixon. Spiro Agnew was indicted and charged, and he pled noli contendere. He ended up having to resign, and then Richard Nixon appointed Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford ascended to the presidency when Nixon resigned, and then pardoned Nixon. So it would be a really unusual situation where the Speaker of the House ended up being the president. Yes, they're technically third in line, but it would have to be something that happened to both the president and the vice president at the same time. So don't get too worried about Kevin McCarthy becoming president. That's not likely to happen. All right. Next one I've got is from Joshua. He says, "Hi, Mike. I think that holding sitting members of Congress accountable for their complicity in the coup attempt is at least as important as holding Trump accountable. Do you think charges will be delivered to sitting members of Congress? Do you think the DOJ could be working on a separate case focused on sitting members of Congress and others that were complicit? They need to be held accountable. Thank you, Joshua." Well, yeah, that's exactly what I think is going on. You're referring to January 6th, and there was one indictment, and that was Donald Trump. You notice they mentioned the co-conspirators. They didn't say unindicted co-conspirators. They said co-conspirators. They did that with Donald Trump because they want to streamline that particular case so they can get him in, get him on trial, get him charged and convicted quickly before the 2024 election. You start throwing other people into the mix, it becomes convoluted, it becomes confusing, and then there's all kinds of problems. But what we know from the classified documents case is that there is going to be superseding indictments added on top of what we've already seen. We saw it with the classified documents. Fact is, we're probably going to see more with the classified documents. They at one time said there'll be another 30 to 45 charges coming. And even though we did get some superseding indictments, nowhere near that many. But in terms of January 6th, I think that's definitely going to happen. In fact, there's been some rumors or leaks or whatever the fuck it is that Jack Smith is definitely looking at members of Congress, and he'd almost have to. I mean, we know members of Congress were doing a lot regarding the January 6th insurrection. We know Jim Jordan was talking to Donald Trump on a regular occasion on January 6th. We know some of these Congress members were talking to the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. We know that at least one member of the House, Loudermilk, was giving tours, recognizant tours the day before. So I do really think that members of Congress are going to get hit. And when that day comes, that changes everything. That's going to throw the Republicans in a fucking tizzy. When it hits them, they are going to freak out. And what's going to happen is all these people supporting Donald Trump will forget about Donald Trump because they'll be worried about saving their own asses. So yes, that's coming. The 6 co-conspirators that we roughly know who they are, they're going to get indicted too. There's plenty more coming with the January 6th indictments. They just did what they did with Donald Trump to streamline it, to make sure we can get it done in quick enough order. All right, next one comes from Lisa. She says, "Hi, Mike, just watched your show with the 2 guests, and it was amazing. Loved it. I'm ready to join you on a show." Well, let's get to doing it, Lisa. I have long COVID and get chronic hives all over me, especially my face. Right now, I'm covered in them. I was watching and I'm thinking no one else will see them if I'm in a little box. So I'm ready. Maybe someone else would like to join. That would be great. Can't wait. Thanks, Mike. Now, we haven't talked to Lisa before. I don't know a lot about Lisa, but she's more than welcome to be on the program. And if somebody wants to join her, you're more than welcome too. Lisa, I'm just, what I need you to do is send me an email at rationalboomer@gmail.com and give me a sense when you're available and see if we can match things up. If we want to get somebody else on the program, we can do that. There's a number of people that are regulars on the show that would be more than happy to come on. I know Eric was on yesterday and he'll probably be on early next week too. So I have no problems with people coming on multiple times. You're all as much as part of the program as I am, and we always want to hear what you have to say. You all bring great insights and perceptions and ideas, and I learn a lot every time I have a listener on the program. So Lisa, you're more than welcome anytime. Anytime. All right, the next one, the last email comes from Paul. He says, good morning. I enjoyed Sunday's show. I agree with your observation on Mr. Trump's primal lizard thinking. No Machiavellian 3D gamesmanship here, just the impetuous rantings of a malicious 12-year-old bully. This asshole, who would be king, has become predictable, and this will be his downfall. Question is, when will those using this pliable fool for their benefit realize enabling him will ultimately screw them as well? Starting to think that the J in Donald J. Trump stands for Jonah, bringing nothing back but cursed bad luck. Thar he blows, and man does he blow. Just ask Putin. Paul. And I will just say this. I appreciate the biblical Jonah reference. And you're absolutely right. This is an argument I have with other TikTokers. And I don't really want to say I argue with other TikToker creators because I really don't talk to any other creators. It just never happens. I've reached out to a lot of the bigger creators. I mean, John Colbert came on. That was great. He's a huge creator. But I've reached out to other ones. I don't get a response back. So, but I hear some of them go on and say, oh, he's playing the long game. Donald Trump is not stupid. Yes, he is stupid. All you have to do is listen to him speak. He is an ignorant man. He's an inarticulate man. He may even be illiterate for all we fucking know. What Donald Trump does is not strategy. What Donald Trump does is reacts. He's emotional. He's reactionary. I know people like these, so I know exactly what he's doing. If I say something to him, he's immediately going to want to strike back, but he's not a quick thinker. He's not articulate, as I said. So he'll just say whatever comes to his mind. It's almost as if I said, Donald Trump, you're a fuckhead. He might say, oh, well, you're a poopy butt. I mean, it's not like Pee Wee Herman, God rest his soul now. Everything Donald Trump or the Republicans do, you could boil it down to the phrase, I know you are, but what am I? Because that's really the game they play. That's what they sound like they're doing every time somebody comes at them. So you're absolutely right. Donald Trump is not a smart man. Donald Trump is a goofball. And as I said in a previous podcast, Donald Trump kind of reminds me of Zelig. Remember that movie with Woody Allen? I think it was Zelig. And with Zelig, no, it wasn't Zelig. It was something else. Zelig's another goofy fucking show. But it was a show where Woody Allen was this guy who's kind of simple-minded and would watch TV, and then he'd repeat quotes from TV. And people would mistake them for ingenious or profound or prophetic words. And he got a lot of adulation for it. And it was a silly show. But that's what I get out of Donald Trump. Donald Being There was the name of the show, I think. Anyway, Zelig was good too, but that's not the same one I was thinking of. Anyway, that's kind of the way it is. Donald Trump says shit. And every time you call him out for the things he says, what do the people that support him say? They say, well, he didn't really mean that. What he really meant. Why is it Donald Trump can't say what he really means? Why do they have to make allowances or give input as to what he really meant? We know what Donald Trump meant. He's simple-minded. What he says, he means. And what he says, he never thought about. He just spewed it out. And he's so narcissistic and so arrogant that he thinks anything that comes out of his mouth is if it came from God directly. It can't be challenged. It can't be wrong. He said it, so it is absolutely the gospel. And for the life of him, he cannot understand why people like us don't believe his bullshit, because what he says is absolutely fucking crazy. All right. We know that Jack Smith indicted Donald Trump. We know that there's going to be some superseding indictments like we were talking about earlier, maybe members of Congress, maybe, well, certainly the 6 co-conspirators that were identified, well, not identified, but mentioned in the indictment. I think we've identified who they are, but they're all going to get indictments too. But here's the interesting thing about Jack Smith. Jack Smith is still issuing subpoenas. He's still got people coming in and testifying regarding January 6th or in and around January 6th. And you're probably wondering, what the fuck is he doing? I mean, he's indicting people. Why would he still be interviewing or having people testify? Well, it turns out that Jack Smith is in fact looking into the fake electors scheme. We got 6 or 7 states that were involved, and Jack Smith is looking into them. Now, we know that in Michigan, the state of Michigan indicted some of the fake electors. And I've said before, just because the state indicted these fucks doesn't mean they're free and clear of federal charges, but they might be in this situation, because what Jack Smith is looking into doesn't really have anything to do with the fake electors themselves. He's going back a little deeper. He's going back to see who are the people that started this concept, came up with the idea of doing this, who strategized, who planned, who did whatever they had to do to put this all together. Because if you think about it, what are the odds that 7 states all would independently say, you know, we should get some fake electors? That isn't what happened. We know somebody in the White House or in Congress or a combination thereof is the one that started this thing and coordinated it. And that's what Jack Smith is looking into. And again, that may be where members of Congress or the buddies of Donald Trump will come in. I doubt Donald Trump had direct involvement with starting these fake electors, but it might have been his idea. It sounds like a Donald Trump idea. It's stupid as fuck. So Jack Smith is also looking into the fake electors and that whole scheme. So that's going to be very interesting, especially if they end up indicting some of the people at the top. You know, it could be Ginny Thomas. It could be Roger Stone. It could be Rudy Giuliani. It could be members of Congress, Mark Meadows. Jack Smith is looking into that right now, and that's what I told you before. Just because Donald Trump was indicted for January 6th doesn't mean we're anywhere close to being done with that situation. There's going to be a lot of indictments with the January 6th thing. There were a lot of people involved. So we got to sit back and be patient and wait. Look for what's happening in Georgia. Look for other superseding indictments in the classified documents. It's going to get crazy. There's going to be a lot of shit going down, and it's going to get chaotic and confusing. All right. Well, after the indictment, Donald Trump went off the deep end and started making threats and claims on social media, on Truth Social. He said, if you come for me, I'll come for you. Well, that sounds like a threat. Within a short time after him posting that, Jack Smith asked the judge in the case, Chutkan, to issue an order of protection. What Jack Smith was worried about is that he's got to turn over a lot of evidence for discovery, and he's concerned about Donald Trump being unhinged and a loose cannon and taking some of that evidence and putting it on Truth Social or other social media outlets. And one of the problems with that is a lot of this comes from the grand jury, and the grand jury is supposed to be secretive. So I think Jack Smith's got a reasonable concern about this. So then the judge comes out, goes to Donald Trump's team and says, I need a response to this. I need to know what you're thinking. And she said, I need it Monday, yesterday. Now, of course, they wanted to extend it out to Thursday, but Judge Chutkan said, fuck you. We need it Monday. Get it here. So they sent it to the judge, and basically in their response, I didn't read the whole thing, but they're basically saying we should be able to release any evidence we get, and it's our First Amendment right, all this stuff. Donald Trump should be able to say whatever he wants. And that's all bullshit. The lawyers for Donald Trump really don't have much to work with, in spite of the fact that they go on TV and sound like they're very confident. Well, so within a couple of hours after Donald Trump's team made the response, Jack Smith put out a rebuttal. And he was basically saying, we can't allow them to release any of the evidence because of the grand jury status and other things. And he said, we cannot trust Donald Trump and his lawyers. And as a case in point, he said, since this clown's been indicted, Donald Trump's lawyers have been on 5 different media outlets spewing out defenses for the upcoming trial. You have to understand what Donald Trump is attempting to do, and his lawyers, what they're attempting to do. They know they can't win in court. They know they can't. So the only option they have is try this in the court of public opinion. Now, for the life of me, I don't understand how that fucking helps. Honestly, I don't know how that helps. I mean, if he gets convicted, he's going to jail. Even if everybody in the world thinks he's innocent, he's still going to fucking jail. But that's all Donald Trump has now. That's all his lawyers have now. So they want to get out as much information as possible. Whether they would actually do it or not, I don't know, but we know Republicans and Donald Trump love to be difficult, love to create hurdles so that we can delay everything over and over again. Now, the response and the rebuttal has gone to, well, actually, the initial response from Jack Smith, Donald Trump's lawyer's response, and now the rebuttal from Jack Smith has gone to the judge. And now we're just going to wait and see what she says and what she's going to require Donald Trump to do or not do. The crazy thing about it is, though, that Donald Trump not only didn't let up after this request was made by Jack Smith, he's ramped it up. He's talking loud as fuck. He's going after Pence. He's going after the judge. He's going after everybody. He's either very scared and doesn't know what to do and he just can't shut his mouth, or he thinks he's got some plan. But what he's not counting on, what he doesn't understand, is that Judge Chutkan is not the kind of woman, not the kind of judge that will be having this. She will not take bullshit. She will not play into Donald Trump's games. She's an honest, decent judge, but she's tough, and she expects people to do what they're supposed to do. So all of this will probably work against Donald Trump ultimately, and I'm good with that. I can't wait till the judge weighs in on this and future things, and see what Donald Trump does at this point. We already know that Donald Trump wants two things. He wants this judge to recuse herself. Now, there is no reason for her to recuse herself other than the fact that Donald Trump knows she's not in his pocket like Aileen Cannon is. So he's running around saying, I can't get a fair trial with this judge and we need a change of venue. Well, the change of venue is not going to happen simply because the rule is that you must be tried in the same county where the crime was committed. There's no real reason he needs to go to another venue, another town. I mean, in his mind, he knows he's not going to have too many friends or supporters on the jury. That's not enough to ask for a venue change. Donald Trump thinks he's special, thinks he gets special treatment. But this judge, this court in Washington, D.C., will not be offering that to Donald Trump. And I wanted to remind you, with all these criminal trials and investigations going on, it's real easy to forget about other important shit. So I want to remind you about something else. We know there are lawsuits out there that are going to involve Donald Trump and his company. We know that E. Jean Carroll had one defamation lawsuit. She's now working on a second defamation lawsuit. And by the way, Donald Trump thought he'd play E. Jean Carroll's same game, and he countersued E. Jean Carroll for defamation. Apparently, in his mind, she said something on CNN. Well, it got to the judge. The judge looked at it and said, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. The judge didn't find it had any basis in law. And while Donald Trump wanted to sue E. Jean Carroll just to show her who's boss, well, the judge showed who's boss, and it's the judge, and Donald Trump will not be able to countersue E. Jean Carroll. But there's another civil suit out there that is huge and is going to be devastating to Donald Trump because he's going to lose it. And of course, I'm talking about the lawsuit brought by Letitia James, the Attorney General from New York. She's got a lawsuit against Donald Trump, his family, and his company, and the people who worked in the company for what she calls massive fraud. Massive fraud. Those are her words. And it's fraud that's gone on for decades. She's suing Donald Trump to the tune of $250 million to start with. $250 million isn't the limit. It can go up much higher from that point. Now, we've been hearing about this for a long time. Question is, when are they going to finally have a trial? Well, Letitia James came out and said, we're ready, we're done, we're ready for trial. So when is the trial going to be? The trial will be on October 2nd this year. So we're about a month and a half out from a huge lawsuit against Donald Trump, his family, and his company. And I want you to think about that. We've got all kinds of court appearances coming, indictments, pretrial hearings, and all this stuff. And when Fani Willis comes out from Georgia, it's going to get even busier. And now just throw in the mix this big-ass lawsuit in New York. Donald Trump is likely to get convicted of any number of felonies. He may do some jail time. But in addition to that, Letitia James is basically looking to put Donald Trump out of business in New York. First, she's going to take a lot of his money. And then secondly, in this lawsuit, it says that Donald Trump and his family can no longer do business at all in New York. Now, you're probably asking, why are you so confident that you think she'll win? Well, I want you to remember Alvin Bragg. Remember, he brought fraud charges against the Trump organization and the CFO, Alan Weisselberg. He got something like 17 to 18 convictions. The Trump organization was convicted of fraud, and so was CFO Alan Weisselberg. Now, keep in mind that Alvin Bragg and Letitia James were trading evidence. So whatever Alvin Bragg had that got his company convicted, Letitia James has it. And he had whatever Letitia James had. So by virtue of him being, or his company being convicted and his CFO being convicted, we know there was some fraud. And we know that the Trump organization wasn't a huge conglomerate. I mean, it was a big business, but there weren't that many people involved. There was the CFO, Trump's kids, and Trump had his hands on everything. So with that conviction up in the Manhattan district, you can feel pretty confident about this lawsuit with Letitia James. She's going to win. She's going to take a lot of his money. She's going to kick him out of New York from doing any kind of business at all, which will be interesting because he has buildings like Trump Tower and such in New York. Letitia James is looking to take Donald Trump down financially and take his business down. I mean, it's already being convicted. It's going to be very tough for them to do any kind of business anyway. But once you take all their money and you make it so they can't do business in New York, there's going to be all kinds of problems. So we got a lot of shit happening, and we'll be watching and we'll let you know as things happen. We've got plenty more to talk about. I tell you what, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, let's talk about the trial or upcoming trial in Florida. Donald Trump is indicted and charged with retaining classified documents, among other things. We know that whole story. But we also know that Judge Aileen Cannon was appointed to oversee this trial. That caused a lot of people some concern because she's a known sycophant of Donald Trump. She sided with Donald Trump. And we were a little worried about this whole situation in Florida with this particular judge. So we've all been kind of waiting for her to fuck up because we know once she does, Jack Smith is going to go to the 11th Circuit, get her overturned again, and then maybe have an excuse to get her recused or thrown off this particular case. I think that's the ultimate goal. I feel better about that situation now that we have what's going on in the January 6th investigation in D.C., because it's quite the opposite with that judge there. There's not going to be any delays, and we're going to have a judge that knows what she's doing and is going to be fair and honest. And frankly, when it comes down to it, I don't care where Donald Trump is convicted or what he's convicted of. He only needs one conviction to take him out of the equation, whether it be in Florida, in Washington, D.C., in Georgia, in New York. It doesn't matter as long as he gets convicted one time. And that's pretty good odds when you know at this point he has 78 charges and will probably have well over 100 when it's all said and done. But anyway, Judge Aileen Cannon is kind of a thorn in the side of Jack Smith. A stunning new ruling on Monday by U.S. District Court for Southern District of Florida, Judge Aileen Cannon, would expose secret grand jury testimony, and that is grounds for the Department of Justice to call for her removal for overseeing the 40-count indictment filed against Donald Trump. It's interesting. We thought we might get away with her being fair and decent and not risking her career, but that apparently isn't the case. Now, Joyce Vance is the one that thinks this might get her thrown off. She's a former U.S. attorney. And apparently Cannon questioned the legal propriety of using an out-of-district grand jury proceeding and struck two sealed motions filed by prosecutors pursuing the former president over the stolen government documents he was hoarding in Mar-a-Lago. What she's saying is, I don't know if we can use out of district grand jury evidence. This evidence and this testimony was taken in Washington, D.C. And the fact of the matter is, she should know this, but there is no problem with grand jury testimony and evidence coming out of another district if there were crimes committed there too. Any idiot judge would know that. I know that because people like Joyce Vance and Glenn Kirshner told me, but the fact is she's making a mistake here. And she recently made another mistake like a week or two ago in a different case where she didn't swear in the jury. She forgot. Whoops. You wouldn't think that'd be something a judge would do, but she did, and she got a little heat for that. Now, as part of her ruling, she is giving government lawyers until August 22nd to defend their request, which raises questions about possible conflicts of interest by Trump aide Walt Nauda's lawyer, Stanley Woodward. News of the ruling and its implications as far as testimony privacy matters led former U.S. Attorney Vance to suggest there is now cause to ask supervising 11th Circuit Court of Appeals to intervene and strip her of the case. Now, Judge Cannon responds to the government's request for a hearing on Nauda's lawyers' conflicts and discloses the existence of a grand jury investigation in another district while denying government's motion to seal it. The government can appeal. This may tee up the issue of her fitness on this case. The thing about her is, I don't know if she is criminal in this situation, but she's woefully inexperienced and she doesn't know what she's doing. And she has a soft spot for Donald Trump. So all of those things spell problems. Now, Vance added, looking like a good week to ask the 11th Circuit to replace the judge. MSNBC host and former prosecutor Katie Fang agreed, chiming in with, if the DOJ filed under seal certain documents and Judge Cannon just disclosed the existence of an otherwise confidential grand jury proceeding, we might be at the motion for recusal stage for the DOJ. Now, former senior DOJ official Harry Litman also questioned what Cannon is doing by writing, I'm betting that the Judge Cannon's account of the out-of-district investigation is not the full story, but hard to see how she can justify not sealing her order referring to another grand jury. Could this be a possible vehicle for taking her up and seeking her recusal? He says it's not clear yet. Now, Andrew Weissman, another guy I have a lot of respect for, a former prosecutor who worked for special counsel Robert Mueller, argued that Cannon was either showing bias or ignorance with her latest ruling. Either way, it's unacceptable. Those are my words. The obstruction crimes that were investigated are charges that could have been brought in Florida or D.C. Remember, when it was first going to happen, we thought these charges would be brought in D.C. because some of the crimes were committed there. We were all surprised when they did it in Florida. They did it in Florida, so there would be no confusion and nobody arguing about it. He was looking to save time. So because it could have been brought in Florida or in D.C., it could be investigated in either district, he wrote, and there was conduct that is alleged to have occurred outside of Florida. Now, Reuters recently reported that Cannon bungled a previous case, which led one law professor to remark, she ignored the public trial right entirely. It is though she didn't know it existed. And let's be honest, she probably didn't. I mean, remember, she was appointed by Donald Trump. Prior to being appointed a federal judge, she's tried maybe 4 cases and judged no cases. She is woefully inexperienced. If she's also biased toward Donald Trump, that just adds to the problems. But whether she's dumb or she's biased toward Donald Trump, either way, it's bad news. And that should be enough to get her kicked off the case. We'll see if Jack Smith decides this is the time to do it or wait till something bigger to happen. I don't know. This seems pretty big, and this seems pretty blatant and flagrant. I got to believe Jack Smith is not the one that will wait around and give her a second chance. I just don't see him doing that. Now, one of the things we've been seeing is Donald Trump's lawyers going on a lot of television, news shows, networks. And that's really kind of weird because the last thing a defense attorney wants to do is go on television and make statements and suggest defenses. That's just not done. But it is kind of in line with Donald Trump because remember, I think they all know they can't win in court, so they're doing what they can to sell it in the court of public opinion. Again, even if they do sell it in the court of public opinion, I don't know how that helps them. They're going to go to court. They're going to be on trial. They're going to lose, and Donald Trump will be convicted. I don't know how the court of public opinion helps them in that matter. Oh, sure, there might be more people that believe in Donald Trump and they might be a little mad, but that doesn't change what the law is. The law is the law, and if you broke the law, you're held accountable. Now, a lot of legal experts are weighing in on Trump's attorney John Laurel's response to a request for the protective order in the special counsel Jack Smith's case. Laurel provided a 29-page response filed 5 minutes before the 5 p.m. deadline. They had till 5 p.m. yesterday. They did it at 4:55. I wonder if they waited till the last hour to write it like we all used to do during our time when we had to do homework. We had the whole weekend and waited for 10 minutes before class before we did it. Maybe you didn't do it, but I sure the fuck did. But it's currently that 29-page response is being reviewed and analyzed. It just came out last night, so we'll probably find out more about it and get a better read on it at some point today. In the filing, Laurel falsely claims in a trial about First Amendment rights, the government seeks to restrict First Amendment rights. The trial is not about First Amendment rights. It is about the actions by the ex-president to overturn the election. And that's the genius with Jack Smith. He knew they would go to the First Amendment rights, so he particularly stipulated in that indictment that this isn't about what he said. This is about what he did. That's vastly different. And so their defense really makes no sense in this particular situation. Now, pointing to Laurel's quote in the publication The Messenger, a legal correspondent, Adam Classfield, writes, Trump's attorney takes the same swing at the protective order in court as he did in his CNN interview. He threw that out there before he even saw this protective order. Laurel appeared on 5 Sunday shows and later complained in his filing about the short turnaround time he was given. He didn't have any turnaround time, but he already had a defense and he'd already spewed that shit on 5 different shows. So I question whether he needed more time than he did. Now, the law upon which this document filed by Trump's lawyers depends are the commandments as handed down on Truth Social. It parrots Trump's ideas. They are irrelevant legally and often distortions of lies. You see, what's happening here is what I've always said. Donald Trump hires lawyers, then takes no advice from lawyers. He tells the lawyers what to say. And for the life of me, I don't know why lawyers do that, because they just get embarrassed, sanctioned, or disbarred or something, but they still do it. Now, MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin offers several examples and an in-depth review. In opposing the special counsel's proposed protective order tonight, Trump's team accuses the Biden Justice Department of waiting over 2.5 years to seek this indictment during an election cycle in which President Trump is the leading candidate. We know the old bullshit. Oh, they're just indicting us and prosecuting us because Joe Biden's afraid of Donald Trump and they're trying to shut down their opponent. Well, here's the fucking thing. They keep talking about 2 years investigating it or 2.5 years investigating it. Seems to me Jack Smith didn't do anything. He didn't start until November of 2022, which makes it about 10 months that he's been working on it. We know that Merrick Garland, much to our chagrin, didn't do jack shit about it the year before. So there isn't been 2.5 years of investigations. It's been 10 months. Now, Lisa Rubin adds, Trump's lawyers insist, based on a post hoc campaign statement, that his vague but threatening weekend Truth Social post was generalized political speech, not directed to this case. Well, if not to this case, then who? I know he said, I sent it to the Koch brothers. Yeah, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. The timing just doesn't work. Trump over the weekend and on Monday appeared to attack special counsel Jack Smith and his prosecutors, Judge Chutkan, and former Vice President Mike Pence and others. And he was very specific in those threats. You see what he's trying to do. He's trying to stir up his base. He's trying to tamper with witnesses. Mike Pence will be a witness in this case. And the fact that he's throwing out threats or insults to Mike Pence is particularly illegal. There is no response they can make to change that. And that's what Jack Smith is counting on. Now, Rubin also notes that any prosecutor could have issued the special counsel's 45-page indictment right after January 6th is ludicrous, especially given that Trump and his allies fought hard, including through protracted litigation, to prevent the DOJ and then later the special counsel from obtaining proof. The idea that it happens on January 6th and immediately we can go into the investigation and gather evidence and charge a lot earlier, like Lisa Rubin says, is absolutely ridiculous. We know the Republicans did everything they fucking could to obstruct it, to slow it down, to deny it, to call it a hoax. She says that Trump's lawyers insist, based on that campaign, that all he did was vague and it didn't really mean anything. Yeah, come on, motherfucker. We're not stupid. Rubin also reveals the most important thing to know about Trump's opposition to the government's proposed protective order is this. He wants the freedom to disclose witness interviews, recordings, etc., conducted outside the grand jury. That would theoretically allow him to reveal the names and publish the statements of those who spoke to the DOJ, the special counsel, outside of the grand jury. And we know what that means. Now, a protective order that allows Trump to reveal the identity of witnesses and discuss substance of their statements outside the grand jury could prejudice potential jurors and intimidate, if not endanger, some of the most helpful witnesses. And we know that's true. I mean, this is Donald Trump's whole game. You remember those two women down in Georgia, those election workers, a mother and daughter. He turned them into criminals, to drug mules, to whatever. And these poor women have been doing nothing but hiding since that time because all of the Trump-la-fuck idiots threatening them and maybe stalking them or whatever they were doing. So Donald Trump just wants the opportunity to expose the people who testified against him so he can intimidate them. That is specifically illegal. And it's going to be interesting to see what Judge Chutkan actually does. She's not going to stand for that shit. She's not going to buy into that shit. She's not Aileen Cannon. She's a serious fucking judge who knows what she's doing. And I'm afraid Donald Trump and his lawyers are going to be woefully disappointed with the decision that comes down from Judge Chutkan. All we can kind of do is wait and see what happens, but I would think it's going to come pretty quickly, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, hopefully soon. and then we can shut this bullshit down with Donald Trump trying to fuck with people's lives again. All right, you remember this guy? He's a former New York police commissioner, Bernie Kerik. Well, he met with prosecutors for special counsel Jack Smith on Monday as part of the investigation into the 2020 election plot. Now, according to the report, Kerik is a close ally of Trump associate Rudy Giuliani. He was asked for information on what Giuliani tried to do to gather evidence that the election was stolen from the former president. He was seen arriving for the interview with his attorney on Monday morning, where he stayed for 5 hours before he left. Now, this all comes amid several other steps that Kerik took to cooperate in the investigation. Last month, he reached a deal with the special counsel to turn over documents related to Trump's plot. And again, it goes to, do I want to go to jail for a long time, or do I want to flip on Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump? Not a hard decision, especially when you see that Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani are going down fucking anyway. Now, Trump was obviously indicted last week on 4 charges, including conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy against rights, and 2 charges of witness tampering. He was swiftly arraigned and pled not guilty. We know that. But there's a lot of information out there, and the special counsel, Jack Smith, needs to get that. Now, prosecutors allege an extensive plot to fraudulently put forward fake electors as a pretext to exclude the certification of real ones. You know, it's funny, when we first heard about the fake electors way back when, around January 6th, none of us really thought too much of it. I mean, we were worried about the attack on the Capitol and the violence and all that sort of stuff. We heard about the fake electors, but we didn't give it much thought. But as we look at it in retrospect, this is going to be pretty serious shit. As I said, we know some states are indicting these fake electors, but they shouldn't be too confident that the federal government, Jack Smith, won't be coming after them too. We know that John Eastman and Giuliani, maybe Ginny Thomas, they were all involved with this fake electors scheme. So somebody like Bernard Kerik is going to be able to give that information as to who was involved in the planning, the coordinating, and just the conceiving of the idea of coming up with fake electors. Now, no one else has been indicted in the case so far, although the indictment lists several unnamed co-conspirators, and the facts laid out strongly hint that Giuliani and fellow Trump lawyer John Eastman are among them. Now, former President Trump's indictment over his actions during the 2020 election, this has kind of poured gasoline on a dispute between the former president, Donald Trump, and former Vice President Mike Pence. We know that recently, after the indictment of Donald Trump in Washington, D.C., Mike Pence all of a sudden grew a pair and started talking shit about Donald Trump. Well, in spite of the fact that there was an order of protection put out, Donald Trump doubled and tripled down and went after Mike Pence. And where that is a problem is that Mike Pence more than likely is a witness in the case regarding the insurrection, overseen by Judge Chutkan. It comes off as he's trying to intimidate a witness or tamper with a witness. You can see how that's a fucking problem. Now, Trump had been restrained over the past year, even as Pence grew increasingly vocal about differing accounts of the events. The war in Ukraine, the future of Social Security, and the Republican Party's approach to abortion. Trump was even mum as Pence launched a competing campaign in June of 2024 to be the president. But he's not going to be the president. Mike Pence has little, if any, chance at all. Now, Trump is angry with Pence, not only for betraying him on January 6th, for having the audacity to run against him in the primary, and now for the things that Mike Pence has said. It's gotten bigger and louder and more aggressive the last few days. The fact is, Alyssa Farah, she was a press aide for Pence and Trump. She said Trump will turn on anyone. Loyalty is a one-way street for him. Pence put his fidelity to the Constitution over Trump. I hope he won't agree to support him again. And that's really it. Donald Trump really expects a lot of loyalty out of his people, but he doesn't offer any loyalty. Once you become unimportant to him or useless to him, you're nobody. You don't exist. It doesn't matter anymore. And how these people don't realize that, how they haven't gathered that after all this time, I don't know. Why they continue to support him, in spite of the fact they know he'll throw them under the bus if he gets the opportunity. Now, Trump has attacked Pence repeatedly on social media since pleading not guilty last Thursday to the charges. He wrote that he felt badly for Pence and his presidential campaign, which had been struggling to gain traction. He's making fun of him, is what he is. Donald Trump said, wow, it's finally happened. Little Mike Pence, and he spelled it Liddle. Isn't that cute? A man who was about to be ousted as governor of Indiana until I came along and made him VP. He has gone to the dark side, Trump wrote. Now, he went on to say, I never told a newly emboldened, not based on 2% polls, Pence to put me above the Constitution. I never said that. Well, we know for a fact you did do that, Donald Trump. Or that's Mike was too honest. That's what Mike Pence is saying, that Donald Trump said he was too honest. Now, I can hear Donald Trump saying that. Now Mike Pence is using that to fundraise. He said Donald Trump was also denying information that was contained in the indictment. I once read a major magazine article on Mike. It said he was not a very good person. I was surprised, but the article was right. Sad. Now, during a campaign stop in New Hampshire over the weekend, Pence was greeted by pro-Trump hecklers who derided the former vice president as a traitor and a sellout. One protester said, why didn't you uphold the Constitution? Pence said, I upheld the Constitution. You should read it. That's probably good advice. These motherfuckers haven't read shit. Trump supporters on January 6th were chanting, hang Mike Pence. You would think that would be enough for Mike Pence to make a break from Donald Trump. But as we know, he spent the last 2.5 years supporting Donald Trump or being too afraid to step up and say anything. I think now that Donald Trump's been indicted a few times and that we're getting closer to the election, and his strategy that he's been using since he announced he's running for president isn't working, he feels like he needs to change it up. And that apparently is what he's doing. It's not going to do any good. It's not going to do any good. Mike Pence would need all of the Republican Party to support him. And at least half of the Republican Party think he's a traitor, and the other half don't think about him at all. They don't see him as a good candidate. I don't know how long it's going to be before Mike Pence realizes this and actually just backs out, goes back to Indiana, and lays low for a while, because he's got no future in politics at this point. I don't think he has a future in politics, even in Indiana. Now, here's an interesting thing. Here's a very interesting thing. And I'm really hoping that they can apply enough pressure to make this happen. More than 36 congressional Democrats want the federal courts to allow live video of proceedings in the criminal case against Donald Trump in Washington. They're arguing that extra steps are needed because of the high stakes nature of the prosecution. One person said something that was interesting. Apparently, there's a law that says you cannot deny a victim of a crime not to be in the courtroom. And that's interesting because what Donald Trump did made all of us victims. And since we can't all go into the courtroom, it would make sense to put it on TV. And the reason why putting it on TV is important is because then we can finally get some real, solid, truthful information out. I've said this before when we're talking about the media. Depending on what you watch, you get a different story. Those folks that watch Fox News, I'll argue with them and they'll say, I never heard that, even though it was a huge story. Fox won't give them everything. Frankly, MSNBC and CNN won't give them everything they need either. So it's important that this trial is on television. So everybody gets the same information, the truth, and knows exactly what goes on. And maybe, and I say maybe, we can get some of these people that think Donald Trump is completely innocent to change their mind. If we want this country to heal, we need everybody to know the truth and the facts. And it's going to take putting this on television to get that done. Now, the group, which includes members of the now disbanded House Select Panel that investigated January 6th, sent a letter Thursday that requests the Judicial Conference explicitly authorize the broadcast of proceedings on charges connected to Trump's efforts to overturn his loss in the 2020 election. Now, the letter, led by a member of that January 6th Select Committee, Representative Adam Schiff, urges that policy-making body of the federal courts to take those steps to ensure the facts of this case are brought forward, unfiltered, to the public. And I couldn't agree more. This is something that we definitely need. Now, the good news is that in Georgia, you can bring video cameras in there, assuming the judge allows it. And if the judge allows it, that video, that programming we'll get from Georgia will be invaluable, much like this would be in Washington, D.C. And I'm going to tell you what's going to fucking happen here. If you remember the congressional hearings, if you're old enough, remember the congressional hearings of Richard Nixon and Watergate and all that stuff. If you remember that, that was big news. Everybody watched it. Everybody knew what happened. And that's what we need to do with regards to these particular cases too. Now, given the historic nature of the charges brought forth in these cases, it's hard to imagine a more powerful circumstance for televised proceedings. Schiff went on to say, if the public is to fully accept the outcome, it will be vitally important for it to witness as directly as possible how the trials are conducted, the strength of the evidence, and the credibility of the witnesses. The letter is also signed by Benny Thompson, a Democrat from Mississippi, who was the chairman of the Select Committee, Jamie Raskin, Zoe Lofgren, and Gerald Conley also signed the letter. This is absolutely essential. We need to get this on television. Everybody talks about healing, you know. Richard Nixon was pardoned because Gerald Ford wanted the nation to heal. In retrospect, that was a bad choice. By doing that to Richard Nixon, maybe part of the reason why we ended up with somebody like Donald Trump doing the things he did. Now, people will say, well, we've got to pardon Donald Trump to heal the nation. And I will say this, we've gone too far for that to be the case. What Donald Trump has done has been so egregious, so blatant, so dangerous to this country. Just letting him off the hook is not going to heal this country. It's going to create more problems than if they do convict him and they do hold him accountable. The vast majority of the people in this country want to see accountability. What happened in this country was probably the most dangerous thing we've ever seen come out of our government and with our politicians. We need to know that it's not going to happen again, because next time we may not get as lucky. And in order to make sure it doesn't happen again, these people have to be convicted and held accountable. And we need these trials on television so everybody can see it. So the people that are the Trumplafucks can't say, well, I didn't hear that, or I didn't know that, or that's a lie. They'll get to watch the proceedings as well as anybody. If they can't get it after that, well, then they can't be saved. But it's important that the real information gets out, especially for those independents that could go either way. They're not sure. It's amazing to me how many people don't follow along closely with the details of the news stories that come out. With the trial on television, it's going to be so highly watched. It's going to be extremely popular. You're not going to see that kind of television rating anywhere other than these trials. And if we can expose that information and show people the evidence and make them feel comfortable with what's going on, and that it's truthful and that it's just, and that these people will be held accountable, if we can do that, we're going to go a long way to healing this country. We can't heal this country by ignoring it, by pardoning people for their crimes. It's gone too far. So I'm really hoping against hope that Congress and other folks can put enough pressure on that these proceedings in DC are televised. It may even take us speaking out and pushing back. The court of public opinion. Remember, I brought that up with Donald Trump before. That's maybe what it takes. So be prepared to be talking loud and pushing back and keeping it in the narrative that we need to see this trial. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.